Camden Bluffs was a picturesque neighborhood, with rows of tidy single-family homes surrounded by rolling lawns and symmetrical hedges. On warm days, residents could be seen walking their dogs along the curved sidewalks, children pedaling bicycles in slow circles, and local teenagers practicing their basketball shots at the community hoop. For newcomers, Camden Bluffs felt almost too pristine, like a scene from a glossy, suburban magazine. A key player in maintaining that immaculate facade was the Camden Bluffs Homeowners Association, HOA. Its mission, at least on paper, was to preserve property values and ensure a harmonious living environment. Most board members took their roles seriously, but remained reasonable and open to compromise. A few, however, approached these responsibilities with near-fanatical zeal. At the top of that list was Dolores Harkness, though virtually everyone in the community had come to call her Karen. At 53, Dolores, Karen, had lived in Camden Bluffs for about 5 years. She had moved in following an inheritance from her late aunt and quickly joined the HOA board, determined to bring order to what she regarded as a neighborhood in desperate need of discipline. Tall, with sharply styled auburn hair and an ever-present clipboard, she sported crisp collared shirts, even in the hottest months, as though prepared to cite code violations at any moment. No weed was too small, no paint color too subtle, for Karen to notice and denounce. Although her official title was HOA Compliance Officer, she exercised her authority as if she chaired every committee. She wasn't always wrong about the need to address untidy lawns or peeling fences, but her aggressive methods and arrogant assumptions alienated many. In whispered conversations at block parties, people complained that she lacked empathy, especially for those who faced difficulties, like new families short on time or elderly residents who couldn't keep up with yard work. Still, Camden Bluffs prided itself on civility. Neighbors greeted each other kindly, overlooked small annoyances, and tried their best to avoid direct conflict with Karen. For her part, Karen seemed satisfied with the fear factor. Her weekly inspections were legendary. She'd parade from house to house, snapping photos on her phone, occasionally scolding homeowners for minor infractions. Over time, though, she'd set her sights on a more specific target: the accessible parking spot near the front of the Camden Bluffs clubhouse, just steps from the community pool and common areas. That reserved space had become a point of contention only recently, after it was officially designated for disabled residents. In particular, a former Army Staff Sergeant named Reggie Dawson used it frequently. Reggie had moved to Camden Bluffs about a year earlier and carried the scars, both visible and invisible, of his military service. He had a wounded knee that required regular physical therapy, along with chronic pain that flared if he walked long distances. The accessible parking spot was a lifeline for him. Karen, however, found Reggie's presence near the front entrance objectionable. She seemed to regard the spot as too prime for one individual to claim regularly, refusing to acknowledge why it was necessary. In her world, rules existed to keep the community orderly, but accommodations for individuals? She seldom found them justifiable. Thus, a quiet, festering resentment grew within her heart. And all too soon, it would erupt into conflict. Reggie Dawson had chosen Camden Bluffs for the same reasons many did. It looked safe, friendly, and well-maintained. He was in his mid-30s, with short-cropped hair and a strong build, despite a slight limp in his left leg. He rarely boasted about his service, preferring to keep details to himself, though it was common knowledge that he had served multiple tours overseas before a serious knee injury ended his active duty. From day one, Reggie had tried to integrate smoothly into neighborhood life. He walked his Labrador Retriever, Boxer, around the block each morning. He joined a recreational softball league organized by some of his neighbors, even though sprinting the bases sometimes aggravated his knee. He greeted passers-by with a warm grin. Yet in many ways, he stayed on the periphery socially, never quite seeking the spotlight. The only visible sign of his disability was the handicap placard that hung from his car's rearview mirror. That placard granted him access to the spot in front of the clubhouse and also at the local supermarket. On good days, when the knee pain was minimal, Reggie would leave the spot open for others. On worse days, especially during physical therapy weeks, he depended on it to shorten his walking distance. Either way, he held the legal right to use it. At first, nobody in Camden Bluffs seemed to mind. If anyone had questions, they kept them private. Yet Karen, ever watchful, recorded exactly how often Reggie parked there, muttering about overuse or unsightly vehicles, as though his dark green SUV offended her sense of order. She would scowl whenever she saw him exit his vehicle, clutching a small cane if his knee acted up. A few neighbors approached Reggie to say they admired his service or to offer support if he ever needed anything. One older couple, the Becketts, even left a gift basket of homemade cookies on his porch, thanking him for his military years. Reggie felt touched, yet a bit embarrassed by the attention. He always smiled and politely declined extra help, saying, "I'm good. Thanks, I manage fine." For a while, life went on without incident. Reggie used the accessible spot as needed. Karen continued her vigilant patrols, and the rest of Camden Bluff's residents enjoyed the calm, well-tended environment. But the uneasy tension, Karen's resentment of special privileges, and her unchecked sense of authority was about to burst into a public showdown. As the HOA's self-appointed enforcer, Karen considered it her duty to keep the community's common areas immaculate. If she noticed a stray gum wrapper or an unclaimed bike leaning against the clubhouse wall, she would pounce, issuing stern reminders or threatening fines. While many found her diligence over the top, they couldn't deny it contributed to the neighborhood's tidy appearance. But for Karen, there was more at stake than cleanliness or compliance. Over time, her frustration toward Reggie's accessible parking spot grew into a near obsession. She latched onto any pretext to criticize the presence of a reserved space right at the prime entrance. To her mind, it was an eyesore and an inconvenience for the rest of the community, particularly herself, who might want a short walk into the clubhouse. The first sign of this vendetta emerged at an HOA meeting one Tuesday evening. Most residents had come to discuss mundane issues, scheduling the summer block party, reviewing the landscaping budget, and discussing a minor fence dispute. Karen, though, hijacked the meeting with a dramatic presentation. She projected photos of the clubhouse's front walkway, overly bright snapshots with Reggie's green SUV visible in the corner. "I'm concerned," Karen announced gravely. "Our main entrance is marred by a permanently reserved space that often sits empty. This spot could be used by visiting guests or for deliveries. Instead, we've designated it as a handicapped space for a single resident who may not even require it at all times. We need more flexibility in how we allocate prime parking." A hushed disbelief fell over the room. Neighbors exchanged awkward glances. One board member, Ms. Tanaka, gently reminded Karen that the spot was legally required for compliance with federal and state accessibility standards, especially since Camden Bluffs had a communal clubhouse. Another member, Mr. Jenkins, asked, "Who are we to decide how often or when someone needs that space? That's between the resident and their doctor." Karen frowned, undeterred. "I'm not suggesting we break the law," she insisted, raising a hand to quell murmurs. "But we must consider rotating usage or moving the accessible space to a less visible side. It might be more discreet and equally functional." She cast a pointed glare at Reggie, who happened to attend that evening's meeting for a separate reason. Reggie, surprised to find himself thrust into the spotlight, simply cleared his throat and spoke quietly. "With respect, Miss Harkness, I have a legal placard. On days my knee hurts, I need that shorter walk. If the HOA wants to move the space somewhere else that meets code, I wouldn't fight it, but typically the front is how building standards are met. The spot is near the ramp and the wide doors." Karen's lips pressed together. Ms. Tanaka quickly moved to end the discussion, citing official guidelines that required accessible parking close to entrances. The rest of the board agreed to drop the matter. Karen, thwarted, did not push for a vote. But the poisonous seed had been planted. Her underlying resentment now had a public forum, and everyone realized she wouldn't let it go easily. Over the following weeks, Camden Bluffs fell into a tense lull. Though Karen continued her usual compliance checks, her focus now was clearly Reggie's parking arrangement. Residents sometimes spotted her hovering around the clubhouse in the early mornings or late evenings, peering at his car and taking notes. The more brazen she became, the more unsettled the neighbors felt. A neighbor named Michelle Reynolds, who worked in social services and had a cousin with a disability, found Karen's behavior infuriating. She confronted Karen one day, asking why she was so intent on harassing a disabled veteran. Karen, in typical style, responded with clipped politeness. I'm not harassing anyone. I'm ensuring fair usage of shared resources. Meanwhile, Reggie noticed subtle changes in the atmosphere. When he parked in the accessible space, he'd sometimes find a printed HOA notice on his windshield about parking durations or references to community courtesy. None of them carried official board signatures, so he realized they must be Karen's personal creations. He tried to brush it off, but on days when his knee flared, the last thing he needed was additional stress. One afternoon, as Reggie limped out of his SUV, Karen appeared behind him, feigning concern. "Reggie," she said in a patronizing tone, "I see you're parking here every day. You do understand it's meant to be used sparingly, correct? Only when absolutely necessary." Before Reggie could respond, another neighbor, Mr. Ortega, stepped in. "Ms. Harkness, it's a legally marked space. He can use it whenever he needs to. That's the law." Karen flushed and stammered something about it being abused, then stalked away, furious. Mr. Ortega turned to Reggie with a sympathetic smile. "Don't let her get to you," he muttered. "She's just pushing boundaries to see where she can dominate." Despite being grateful for the occasional ally stepping in, Reggie felt exhausted by the persistent scrutiny. He'd served in difficult war zones, faced harsh conditions, and never shrank from adversity. But something about Karen's incessant policing grated on him. It wasn't just about the spot, it was about basic dignity. A small part of him dreaded that the situation might escalate in ways no one could predict. The simmering conflict boiled over on a bright Saturday morning. The air was fresh with the scent of newly mowed grass, and a weekend hush lay over the neighborhood. Families slept in, while a few early risers jogged or watered their lawns. Reggie had an appointment at the local VA clinic that day, but first, he planned to stop by the Camden Bluffs clubhouse to pick up his mail from the communal boxes outside. When he arrived, he discovered something bizarre: several orange traffic cones arranged in a neat row across the accessible spot. A laminated sign hung from one, emblazoned with bold letters. "Reserved for VIP use only. No unauthorized parking." Reggie blinked in disbelief. At first, he wondered if there was some official maintenance happening, but the sign's wording felt suspiciously personal. It didn't reference the HOA or any official reason. Worse, the cones completely blocked off the very spot designated for disabled parking. His knee was acting up that morning, so he really did need that close space. Furrowing his brow, Reggie stepped out to inspect. Another car pulled up behind him. It was Michelle Reynolds, returning from an errand. She hopped out, eyes flashing with anger. "Are you kidding me? Did Karen do this?" Michelle snapped. She marched forward and read the sign. "VIP use? More like she thinks she's the only VIP." Reggie tried to keep calm, though his pulse quickened. He grabbed one of the cones, intending to move it aside. At that moment, Karen appeared as if summoned by magic. She strode across the clubhouse lot, wearing a smug expression. "I placed those cones for a very important visitor," Karen announced. "We have a potential property investor touring the community. We need to keep the spot open to make a good impression. If you don't mind, Reggie, I'd appreciate you parking elsewhere today." Michelle bristled. "That's not how accessible parking works. You can't just hijack it for your personal whim." Karen rolled her eyes. "Calm down. This isn't personal. The space is more about convenience than necessity. We have other open spots just a few steps away. I'm sure Reggie can manage for one day." Tension thickened the air. Reggie clenched his jaw. "Ma'am, I have a legal right to use this space," he said, voice steady but tight. "Move the cones." Karen's lips curled into a sneer. "Don't be dramatic. We're talking a difference of a few dozen feet. It's not that big a deal." By now, neighbors driving by slowed to watch. A sense of disbelief and outrage spread as they recognized Karen's cones blocking the disability spot. Michelle looked at Reggie, silently asking if he wanted backup. Reggie, steadying himself on the hood of his car, calmly began picking up the cones one by one and placing them on the sidewalk. Karen gasped. "You have no authority to remove those cones. I'm an HOA official. This area is under my jurisdiction." "Wrong," Michelle interjected. "That's a designated ADA space, Karen. You're violating Reggie's rights." She took out her phone, snapping pictures of Karen, the cones, and the sign. Seething, Karen threatened to issue some form of community citation. But Reggie ignored her. He parked in the accessible spot, legally, as always, and limped toward the clubhouse entrance, his mailbox key in hand. Karen's furious ranting faded behind him, overshadowed by a wave of neighbors quietly cheering him on. This blatant attempt to commandeer the spot would not be forgotten. Within hours, the story spread across Camden Bluffs like wildfire. Michelle Reynolds posted photos on the neighborhood's online forum, describing how Karen had barricaded the accessible spot with orange cones. The reactions were swift and explosive. Dozens of residents chimed in to express shock, anger, and disbelief. Some recounted personal run-ins with Karen's overreach. Others, especially those who had disabled family members, were horrified that anyone would treat an accessible space so callously. A few voices tried to remain neutral, urging calm. But the overwhelming sentiment was condemnation of Karen's action as discriminatory and heartless. By midday, the HOA president, a mild-mannered man named David Lester, was inundated with emails and phone calls demanding an immediate response. David, who typically tried to keep the peace, found himself in the hot seat. He scheduled an emergency board meeting to address the uproar. Karen, ironically, argued that her cones were temporary and purely for an important community function, but no one bought that excuse. The leaked photos proved otherwise. Reggie, meanwhile, was stunned by the level of support. Neighbors brought him homemade dinners. Others left encouraging notes on his porch, praising him for standing his ground. A local reporter from the city paper reached out, having heard rumors of a disabled veteran's fight for parking. Reggie politely declined interviews, not wanting to spotlight himself. He only wanted to live in peace. But the issue had grown bigger than him. It became symbolic of a larger conversation about respect for veterans, disability rights, and the misuse of HOA authority. Karen's brazen attempt at commandeering that parking spot had lit a fuse of community frustration. For years, many in Camden Bluffs had endured her petty fines and condescending notes. Now, they viewed her conflict with Reggie as a tipping point. The emergency HOA meeting took place online via a video conference platform that same evening. Dozens of residents tuned in, straining to watch the board's deliberations. Karen tried to downplay the incident, calling it a misunderstanding. She insisted she never intended to violate the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. But photographic evidence showed she had effectively blocked the spot from Reggie's use. Other board members grilled her. "What were you thinking? Do you realize how this looks?" Karen offered stilted explanations, claiming she only used the cones for a short time and that Reggie overreacted. When David Lester pressed her to apologize, she muttered something half-hearted, not even addressing Reggie by name. The board ultimately passed a resolution forbidding any individual from modifying or obstructing ADA-compliant parking without explicit city permission. Karen received a formal censure, though in practice, that penalty was mainly symbolic. To the neighbors' disappointment, no stronger action was taken that night. Yet the seeds of a more profound reckoning had been sown. People realized that if the HOA wouldn't hold Karen accountable, they'd need to take matters into their own hands, legally and publicly. And a certain group of local veterans was about to do just that. News of Karen's attempt to block a disabled vet's parking space reached beyond Camden Bluffs. A friend of Michelle Reynolds forwarded the forum post to a local Veterans Association chapter, made up of retirees, active service personnel, and advocates for military families. It didn't take long for the story to spark outrage. Within days, Reggie received a cordial phone call from Colonel Red Everett Malone, who led the local Vets Association. The colonel introduced himself politely, then jumped to the matter at hand. "Son, I heard what happened over there at Camden Bluffs. Some folks are concerned about this so-called HOA official messing with your accessible spot." Reggie, feeling slightly uncomfortable about outside interference, tried to minimize it. "Yes, sir. It was just a one-time incident, some orange cones." The board reprimanded her. But Colonel Malone wasn't convinced. "You shouldn't have to fight for a right that's already yours. I'll be blunt. Messing with a disabled veteran's access is not just rude. It's possibly illegal. I spoke with some of our members, and they want to help. At minimum, we'd like to ensure this never happens again." Reggie thanked him but admitted he had no idea what ensuring this never happens again might look like. He suspected the colonel had a plan, though. Over the next couple of conversations, it became clear that the Vets Association felt compelled to make a statement. They wanted to create a visible, unassailable symbol that the parking spot was not to be tampered with, an unmistakable sign of respect for veterans. The seed of an idea took shape, a custom parking spot artwork, courtesy of local artists who specialized in patriotic murals. The colonel explained that they could coordinate with the city's ADA enforcement office to update the standard striped lines on the pavement into something bolder, a camouflage-themed mural, perhaps, with service emblems and the standard wheelchair symbol. Legally, as long as the spot still complied with ADA regulations, correct signage, correct measurements, the design could incorporate decorative elements. Reggie was hesitant at first, unsure he wanted more attention. But the colonel's tone was persuasive, even fatherly. "This is bigger than you, son. It's about every disabled service member who might visit Camden Bluffs. We want them to see they're welcome here." Touched, Reggie agreed. "Okay, Colonel, but let's do it the right way. I don't want any more drama than necessary." "Oh, I can't promise no drama," the colonel chuckled. "But I can promise we'll follow the law and pay for it ourselves. We've got a great artist in the association, and we'll talk to the city for the needed permits. That Karen can't say it's unauthorized if we do it by the book." And so, the wheels were set in motion. While Karen reveled in her sense of victory after the cone's fiasco, believing she'd only received a slap on the wrist, she had no clue that a grand gesture, one that would cement Reggie's right to the space, was about to unfold. The Veterans Association wasted no time. Colonel Malone reached out to City Hall, asking about the legalities of customizing an ADA parking spot on private HOA property. The city's building inspector explained that normally the standard white wheelchair symbol and blue background must remain clear, but additional artwork around or behind the symbol was permissible as long as it didn't obscure official markings and signage. Next, the colonel approached the Camden Bluffs board itself. David Lester, still reeling from the public outcry, was eager to mend bridges. He saw no reason to deny a tasteful, compliant mural on the space. Most board members agreed it would present Camden Bluffs in a positive light, supporting veterans and disability rights. They even saw potential PR value, as local media might report on it favorably. And so, with a quick internal vote, the HOA granted permission, provided the final design met the city's guidelines. Meanwhile, the colonel's chosen artist, a Marine veteran named Rachel Dietz, began sketches. She proposed a background of subtle green and brown camouflage patterns, with the universal wheelchair emblem highlighted in bright white to ensure visibility. Around the edges, she'd paint small badges representing each branch of the military: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. At the top, the word respect would curve in bold letters. Reggie, shown a preliminary design, felt torn between gratitude and embarrassment. "This is a lot," he murmured, scanning the sketches. He worried about standing out or making it seem like he demanded special treatment. Rachel nodded, understanding. "Look, if you want it toned down, we can adjust the design," she offered. But the colonel's pretty set on making a bold statement. Reggie thought of Karen's smug face, those orange cones, and the humiliating sense that he was a second-class citizen whenever she questioned his need. "No," he finally said. "Let's do it. I'd be honored if it helps others in my situation feel less singled out." Colonel Malone beamed when he heard the news. "That's the spirit. We'll plan a small unveiling ceremony. Nothing fancy, just a few of us from the Vets Association and some neighbors to show support." In the background, word of this upcoming transformation swirled around Camden Bluffs, generating excitement. Neighbors posted messages of encouragement. "Can't wait to see the new parking spot," or "so proud of our neighborhood for standing up for Reggie." Meanwhile, Karen remained oddly silent. Some speculated she was quietly stewing, plotting her next move. Others heard rumors she might be planning to file an official complaint with the city. Yet for now, she kept her head down, apparently hoping to sabotage the plan in stealthier ways. While the Veterans Association worked openly, Karen plotted out of sight. Publicly, she presented a veneer of disinterest, as though she'd moved on to other HOA matters: cracked sidewalks, unauthorized garden gnomes, or minor fence color violations. Privately, she was livid that her censure had emboldened the community to stand against her. The idea of a flamboyant mural in her parking lot grated on her sense of control. She searched for ways to derail the project. One angle involved anonymous letters. Multiple Camden Bluffs board members received typed notes suggesting that a large mural might devalue neighboring properties by clashing with the uniform aesthetic. Another letter claimed that custom paint in a parking space might be legally questionable, threatening potential lawsuits. None were signed, and all arrived by standard mail, lacking a return address. The board dismissed them, guessing Karen was behind the letters. When that failed, Karen tried contacting City Hall under a fake name, insisting the Veterans Association's design might violate the ADA's visual guidelines. A patient clerk listened politely, but explained the city had already reviewed and approved the plan. Frustrated, Karen hung up in a huff. As the scheduled painting day neared, Karen grew desperate. According to the forum posts, the official unveiling would happen on a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. That left a brief window for sabotage. She weighed her options, tossing paint on the spot the night before, drilling holes in the pavement, or removing signage. But any such action would be flagrantly illegal and risk serious consequences. Even Karen recognized that tampering with an ADA designation could result in hefty fines. So, she bided her time, waiting to see if a better opportunity arose. Meanwhile, the neighborhood buzzed with anticipation. Residents planned to gather that Saturday to watch Rachel Dietz transform the space into something emblematic and unmissable. Reggie kept a humble profile, but each day brought him messages of support. He even tried to invite Karen to the ceremony, hoping a gesture of goodwill might thaw her. Predictably, she ignored his invitation altogether. Saturday morning arrived crisp and clear, with just enough sun to promise a warm midday. By 9 a.m., Colonel Malone and half a dozen volunteers had already gathered in the clubhouse parking lot, setting up sawhorses and caution tape to cordon off the accessible spot. A pickup truck arrived bearing cans of specialized paint, brushes, stencils, and an array of small metal emblems shaped like military insignia. Reggie showed up a few minutes later. Though his knee was aching, he refused to miss this milestone. He brought donuts and coffee as a small token of gratitude for the volunteers. One by one, neighbors began trickling in: Michelle Reynolds, Mr. Ortega, M.S. Tanaka from the board, and many more. Some carried flags or wore T-shirts printed with slogans like "Support our troops." A quiet excitement rippled through the crowd as they realized they were about to witness a piece of local history. Rachel Dietz, the artist, arrived last, stepping out of her car in paint-stained overalls and combat boots. She greeted everyone enthusiastically, then walked to the space with a purposeful stride. She inspected the pavement, ensuring it was clean enough for the paint to adhere. Colonel Malone gave a short speech, highlighting Reggie's service, praising Camden Bluffs for its supportive community, and explaining the significance of the custom design. "This," he declared, "is more than just paint on asphalt. It's a reminder that disabled veterans deserve more than courtesy. They deserve our unwavering respect." The small crowd applauded. Rachel then began mapping out the design with chalk lines. Carefully, she measured the required dimensions for the central ADA wheelchair symbol, ensuring compliance. Once satisfied, she and two helpers started rolling on the base layers, a bold swath of olive green, surrounded by splotches of brown and tan to create a camouflage effect. The onlookers watched in fascination, snapping photos as the patch of asphalt transformed into an art piece. Reggie stood off to the side, quietly touched by the scene. He thought back on the humiliations of the orange cones, the subtle notes, the sideways glances. Today, though, he felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. The cynic in him worried that Karen might pop out at any moment, raising some petty objection. But as the minutes ticked by, she remained absent. By noon, the mural was half finished. The green and brown camouflage background stretched in a broad rectangle, while the crisp white wheelchair icon was stenciled precisely in the middle. Next came the final touches, small insignias around the perimeter representing each branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. Rachel knelt with a fine brush, painstakingly painting "Respect" near the top, in tall, block-style letters. Onlookers murmured approval, some snapping pictures for social media. Others clapped each time a new detail emerged. The sense of communal pride was palpable. For an afternoon, Camden Bluffs felt unified against any who might demean or dismiss their disabled neighbors. Ironically, Karen's attempts to harass Reggie had triggered a wave of solidarity unlike anything the community had experienced before. Just as the last coats of paint began to dry, A hush fell over the crowd. A familiar figure stepped out of a black sedan parked at the lot's far end. It was Karen, dolled up in a blazer and pressed slacks, her posture stiff as a board. People exchanged uneasy looks. Some expected she might cause a scene. Others wondered if maybe she had come to make peace. Karen approached slowly, her eyes flicking over the freshly painted mural. It was impossible not to notice the bright colors, the proudly displayed insignias, the bold wheelchair icon. Even if she wanted to pretend it was an eyesore, she couldn't deny the artistry. Her gaze swept across the small crowd, many of whom stared back with undisguised wariness. Colonel Malone, never one to shy from confrontation, stepped forward. "Morning, Miss Harkness," he said politely. "We're nearly done. Care to take a closer look?" Karen pursed her lips. She seemed unsettled by the courtesy. "I'm here on official HOA business," she replied, voice tight. "We receive calls from concerned residents about possible code violations. I need to verify that the space still meets safety standards." The colonel maintained a respectful tone. "You're welcome to inspect. We have approval from the city and the HOA board." David Lester signed off personally. Several neighbors nodded, confirming. Even Ms. Tanaka, a board member, stepped forward with a binder of permits, offering them to Karen. For a tense moment, Karen flipped through the pages. Everything was in order: city guidelines, the board's resolution, even references to ADA compliance. She bit her lower lip. People around her waited, expecting an outburst or some last-ditch attempt to sabotage. Yet the evidence was airtight. Then Reggie came forward, walking with a slight limp, his posture dignified. "Miss Harkness," he said softly, "I hope you can see this mural isn't meant to exclude anyone. It's just a reminder that some of us need a bit more consideration. Nothing more." Karen's face flushed. A beat of silence passed. Her eyes darted around, seeking some leverage. Finding none, she managed a curt nod. "Very well," she said. "If the board and city have approved it, there's nothing further for me to do." She turned and marched back toward her car, ignoring the neighbors who parted to let her pass. While it wasn't a confession of guilt or an apology, her abrupt departure felt like a tacit admission of defeat. The tension broke with a scattered round of applause, both at her exit and at the mural's completion. Colonel Malone turned to Reggie, clapping him on the shoulder. "That's the power of doing things the right way, son," he said. "She can't stop what's legal, moral, and backed by the community." By late afternoon, the paint had dried fully, and the caution tape came down. A small podium was set up, borrowed from the clubhouse interior. Word had spread through Camden Bluffs that the mural was complete, and more residents gathered out of curiosity, drawn by the festively dressed lot and the presence of local veterans. Even a small group from the city's local news station showed up, cameras in tow. Colonel Malone stepped behind the podium, clearing his throat. "Neighbors, friends, fellow veterans," he began, voice resonating across the parking lot. "Today, we dedicate this custom parking spot to all disabled service members, and indeed, to anyone who faces physical challenges. This is a place of welcome, not just a painted symbol on pavement. It stands for respect." He gestured for Reggie to join him. Blushing under the crowd's attention, Reggie complied. The colonel's voice took on a fatherly warmth. "Staff Sergeant Dawson here represents countless men and women who've served our country and returned with injuries, visible or hidden. We owe them more than a casual nod. We owe them tangible support, like ensuring they have the basic convenience of safe, accessible parking. This mural is a small but meaningful gesture to that end." The crowd applauded, some cheering. Reggie cleared his throat, mustering courage to speak into the microphone. I'm not much for speeches," he began. Soft laughter rippled through the assembly. "But I want to thank everyone. Colonel Malone, the Vets Association, Rachel the artist, the HOA members who supported this, and my neighbors. You turned a negative situation into something positive. And I hope this spot will stand for dignity and kindness, long after we're all gone." More applause. Camera flashes snapped. A reporter stepped forward to ask a few questions. "How do you feel about the reaction, Staff Sergeant Dawson?" Reggie, awkward but sincere, replied that he was humbled. Another asked Colonel Malone about the association's plans for other neighborhoods, and he confirmed they'd be open to helping any community that wanted to highlight accessibility for disabled veterans. At the ceremony's conclusion, neighbors lined up to take pictures beside the newly painted space. Families with children taught them about the meaning of the military emblems. Some older veterans saluted the wheelchair symbol in tribute to comrades who could not stand or walk unassisted. It was a surprisingly emotional scene, a shared moment of unity that Camden Bluffs would remember for years. Karen was conspicuously absent, but few missed her presence. The event belonged to Reggie, the veterans, and the neighbors who chose empathy over petty grievances. The accessible spot, once a source of dispute, had morphed into a proud testament to the neighborhood's collective conscience. The days following the mural's unveiling were filled with a sense of relief in Camden Bluffs. Most residents celebrated the new parking spot design, and the local paper ran a short feature titled, "Neighborhood Honors Disabled Veteran with Custom Mural." Reggie found himself the reluctant face of a cause. Occasionally, passers-by recognized him in the grocery store, offering a handshake or a simple, heartfelt, "Thank you for your service." Karen, on the other hand, simmered with resentment. She refused to publicly admit defeat, but the neighborhood's approval of the mural felt like a personal indictment of her earlier stance. In her mind, the entire fiasco had spun out of control. She'd only wanted to reallocate that prime spot, and now she was painted as the villain who discriminated against a disabled veteran. During the next HOA meeting, a routine session about landscaping budgets, Karen couldn't resist an angry tangent. She ranted about diminished uniformity and eyesore color schemes in the clubhouse lot. But Ms. Tanaka calmly reminded her that the board had unanimously approved the design. David Lester gently changed the subject, refusing to let Karen derail the meeting. One or two of Karen's old allies shot her sympathetic glances, but they were powerless to overturn the widely supported decision. Publicly, Karen claimed she'd moved on. Privately, she launched petty attacks wherever she could. She filed minor complaints about Reggie's lawn length, claiming it exceeded HOA limits by an inch. She complained about neighbors who left holiday decorations up a day too long. She even tried to resurrect the matter of excessive foot traffic around the clubhouse, implying the mural had turned the area into a tourist attraction. In every instance, the board either dismissed or tabled her grievances. Though these antics grew tiresome, the community recognized them as desperate flailing rather than real threats. Karen's credibility had taken a severe hit. The moral weight of harassing a disabled vet had proven too great for any contrived rules to overshadow. Still, those close to Reggie worried that Karen's bitterness might eventually escalate into something more disruptive. They encouraged him to keep documenting every interaction, just in case. Despite Karen's background machinations, daily life in Camden Bluffs returned to a new normal. The dramatic conflict over the parking spot receded into memory as residents refocused on their routines, mowing lawns, organizing barbecues, and chatting on porches during balmy evenings. Kids resumed riding bikes around the cul-de-sacs. The summer sun glinted off the newly painted camouflage pattern, making the mural an appealing conversation piece. Occasionally, a curious visitor would stop by just to see the famed veterans parking artwork. Some were from other HOA communities, looking for inspiration to replicate the idea. Others were local veterans who'd heard about the mural through the association. Reggie welcomed them kindly, directing them to the exact spot. He tried to keep a low profile, still uncomfortable with the spotlight, but he couldn't deny it felt good to know the mural was making a positive impression. One warm afternoon, Michelle Reynolds organized a small poolside gathering at the clubhouse to celebrate the success of the mural project. She invited Colonel Malone, Rachel, Ms. Tanaka, David Lester, and a handful of supportive neighbors. Reggie attended too, gingerly testing his knee in the shallow end of the pool. They laughed, swapped stories, and recognized how adversity sometimes leads to stronger bonds. Who would have thought, mused Ms. Tanaka, sipping lemonade, that a negative incident, those awful cones, would bring about something so meaningful for our neighborhood? Everyone nodded. Colonel Malone joked, "I might send Ms. Karen a thank you note for inadvertently setting off this chain of events," earning a round of amused groans. Far from the clubhouse, behind the drawn blinds of her pristine home, Karen watched from a window. She saw the small group laughing, likely reveling in their recent achievements. Her jaw set in silent anger. It stung that her neighbors had grown closer in the face of her meddling. But for the moment, she kept her distance, uncertain how to reclaim her influence or whether she even could. Midsummer arrived, bringing with it a flurry of local events. One such occasion was the City Pride Day, a festival held in the Central Park of the nearby downtown district. The event featured booths from various organizations, local food trucks, and a short ceremony honoring civic improvements or charitable initiatives. This year, the festival organizers, upon hearing about Camden Bluff's unique accessible spot, decided to give them a small commendation for innovative community support. Reggie was hesitant to attend, but Colonel Malone persuaded him. "It's just a short mention," the colonel said. "They'll call our neighborhood representative up for a plaque. You should be there. It's your space, after all." So, on a balmy Saturday, Reggie, Colonel Malone, Rachel Dietz, and a few Camden Bluffs residents found themselves standing on a modest stage in the city park. A local councilwoman handed Colonel Malone a framed certificate praising the community-driven effort to enhance accessibility and respect for disabled veterans. Rachel, the artist, received special mention for her creative design. Ms. Tanaka, representing the HOA officially, thanked everyone who had supported the project. And then, in a move Reggie hadn't expected, the councilwoman asked him to step forward. "Staff Sergeant Dawson," she said, "on behalf of our city, we want to express gratitude for your service to our country and for allowing your neighborhood to honor you and veterans like you with that remarkable mural. It's an inspiration to the entire community. Thank you." She offered him the microphone. Briefly flustered, Reggie cleared his throat. "I appreciate this recognition," he said quietly. "But the real thanks belong to my neighbors and the Veterans Association. I just showed up with a messed up knee and parked my car." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Jokes aside, I hope other communities might see what happened in Camden Bluffs and remember that a little empathy goes a long way. Polite applause followed. Cameras flashed. The small moment of civic praise reminded Reggie that even the simplest act, like defending one's right to a parking space, could spark positive change. Word of the commendation circulated back to Camden Bluffs, deepening the sense of community pride. Even some who had once been indifferent to Reggie's plight felt genuinely proud to be part of a neighborhood recognized for championing accessibility. As for Karen, she pretended to ignore the news. But the swirl of congratulatory messages on the neighborhood forum, the pictures of Reggie on stage, and the mention of Camden Bluffs in the local paper infuriated her. Each sign of the mural's acceptance reminded her how completely her plan had backfired. In the weeks following the festival, Camden Bluffs residents expected Karen to either relent or continue her petty harassment. True to form, she chose the latter. She began combing through the HOA bylaws, searching for any possible technical violation in the painting's dimensions. She even measured the distance between the wheelchair emblem and the curb, hoping to find it off by an inch. But every measurement aligned perfectly with the city's permit. At last, Karen must have realized that nibbling at details wouldn't bring down the mural. One sweltering afternoon, Reggie arrived at the clubhouse parking lot to find Karen standing there, arms folded, accompanied by a stranger in a suit. The man introduced himself as Ryan Morris, an attorney who specialized in property disputes. Karen wasted no time. "Reggie," she said curtly, "this attorney represents me in a matter concerning misuse of common property. We believe that the mural was improperly authorized, and we're prepared to file an injunction forcing its removal." Reggie felt his chest tighten. "You can't be serious," he said, voice low. "The board approved it. The city approved it. This has gone far enough. I'm afraid Ms. Harkness has grounds," the lawyer said, flipping through a folder. "There's a clause in the HOA agreement restricting non-uniform alterations to common areas without unanimous board approval." Reggie frowned. The board vote was a majority, not unanimous, he admitted. But that's how almost all board decisions pass. Karen smirked triumphantly. "But the rules for structural changes to surfaces differ from normal decisions, Reggie," she said, voice dripping with condescension. "I'm sorry, but it looks like you'll need a unanimous vote to keep your little painting." His temper flared. "My little painting is a recognized ADA-compliant marking that helps me, and any disabled person, park safely. If you file an injunction, you realize the press will have a field day, right?" Karen shrugged. "Rules are rules, Reggie. I can't pick and choose them, even if you think I'm heartless." At that moment, Colonel Malone and Ms. Tanaka, who happened to be walking by, spotted the confrontation. Ms. Tanaka glanced at the lawyer's folder and recognized the bylaw reference. Wait, that clause pertains to permanent structural changes like removing a wall or adding a fence, she pointed out. Painting on pavement doesn't qualify as a structural change. We had the association's legal counsel weigh in on this months ago. You're twisting the bylaw. The attorney blinked in surprise. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but Ms. Tanaka continued. If you want to push this, Ms. Harkness, the HOA will defend its position. We'll also happily share with the media how you're spending everyone's dues on a frivolous lawsuit to remove a disabled veteran's parking spot. Karen's face twisted in frustration. It was clear her grand legal gambit wasn't going as planned. Reggie folded his arms, waiting. Colonel Malone said calmly, "Look, we can settle this right now. The board has the authority, and we have the city's backing. If you want to shame yourself by going to court, go ahead. You'll lose, and you'll expose yourself to legal fees." The lawyer, sensing the blowback, quietly told Karen that perhaps this wasn't the strongest case. Karen, cornered, flung an enraged glare at Reggie and the others. "Fine," she snapped. "Enjoy your spectacle while it lasts." She spun on her heel and stormed to her car, the lawyer trailing behind. As she peeled out of the parking lot, Colonel Malone let out a low whistle. "She's persistent, I'll give her that. But she's out of moves." Reggie exhaled a shaky breath. "I hope so," he murmured. "I'm tired of watching my back." Ms. Tanaka placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We all are," she said. "But she's lost public support. Any further attempts will only make her look worse." A few days after Karen's failed injunction attempt, Reggie came home to a surprising sight on his doorstep. A small bouquet of flowers resting against the doorframe. At first, he assumed it must be from a neighbor grateful for his service. But the note attached read simply, "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding. DH." DH could only be Dolores Harkness, Karen. Reggie stared at the note, wondering if it was some kind of trick. The handwriting was neat and formal, and the flowers looked fresh, not an afterthought. Confusion warred with skepticism in his mind. All evening, he pondered whether to respond. Perhaps Karen was trying to mitigate potential legal fallout, or maybe she'd had a genuine change of heart. In the end, he decided to send a polite text. He had her number from an HOA directory, thanking her for the flowers but saying little else. Her reply was terse, "You're welcome." Word of this development spread when Reggie casually mentioned it to Michelle Reynolds. Neighbors were dumbfounded. Some suspected Karen's note was purely self-serving. Others wondered if, at long last, she realized she couldn't win. A handful believed she might be trying to repair her reputation. Regardless of her motives, Karen's aggression toward Reggie tapered off. She stopped complaining about his lawn height or conjuring parking infractions. She even abstained from certain HOA votes involving the clubhouse. Though she never openly apologized in a public forum, the tension around the mural softened. Reggie, for his part, accepted the bouquet and note as a small sign that he might no longer be singled out. He continued to park in his newly decorated space without incident. Each time he walked past the camouflage design, he felt a swell of gratitude for the neighbors who had stood by him. At the same time, he remained on guard, unsure if Karen's olive branch was permanent or just another ploy. As the summer began to wane, Camden Bluffs found itself in a remarkably different atmosphere than just a few months prior. The custom mural remained a focal point of pride, and the story of how a community rallied around a disabled veteran had spread far and wide, garnering positive press. The Vets Association continued to keep an eye on Camden Bluffs, ready to intervene if Karen ever revived her old campaign. In the end, though, Karen seemed to settle into a quieter role. She still conducted her rounds, but with less zeal. Neighbors suspected she'd realized that pushing too hard could backfire spectacularly. The mural was unassailable, protected by law and by the powerful shield of public opinion. Meanwhile, Reggie embraced his improved status among neighbors. He organized a small benefit barbecue for the local VA hospital, turning the clubhouse parking lot into a lively gathering with grilled hot dogs, kids' activities, and live music. The camouflage mural served as a stage backdrop. Even Ms. Tanaka joked that the once contentious parking spot had become Camden Bluff's unofficial community emblem. At the barbecue, Colonel Malone awarded Reggie a plaque from the Vets Association, praising his calm perseverance under scrutiny. Reggie accepted, highlighting again that it was the neighborhood's solidarity, not his personal efforts, that had won the day. Afterward, he found Karen standing at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed. This time, though, she didn't look furious, more resigned or introspective. She caught his eye, and after a brief hesitation, she inclined her head in acknowledgement. Reggie nodded back. It was neither a warm greeting nor an apology, but it was something. Perhaps, in her own stubborn way, Karen recognized that Camden Bluffs had changed, and that it had changed around her, leaving her no choice but to adapt. In the end, Camden Bluffs emerged stronger for the confrontation that once threatened its harmony. The accessible parking spot, now adorned with a vibrant camouflage mural, stood as a permanent reminder of respect and unity. Residents learned that a community is more than manicured lawns and tidy fences. It's people standing up for one another, ensuring that no voice is drowned out by arbitrary rules or intimidation. Dolores, Karen, Harkness never fully recanted her earlier actions. Yet, she dropped her most extreme tactics, seemingly accepting that the mural would remain. Over time, she refocused on less divisive HOA tasks, such as verifying that holiday lights didn't stay up too long or that trash cans were promptly moved from the curb. She remained a polarizing figure, but her power to disrupt was curtailed. Reggie Dawson carried on with his quiet life, parking comfortably near the clubhouse whenever he needed to. Each time he rolled into that space, the bold design reminded him not just of his own struggles, but of the many who rallied around him. When neighbors asked if he felt the mural was too much attention, he would smile, shrug, and say, "Maybe, but it's nice to know people care enough to make a statement." And so, life in Camden Bluffs found its equilibrium. The drama became local lore, the tale of how Karen tried to claim a disabled veteran's parking spot with orange cones, only to inspire a glorious, unremovable tribute that forever marked the community's heart. In that sense, her attempt at control failed spectacularly, yet it birthed something more profound. People who visited Camden Bluffs immediately noticed the flamboyant camouflage design, asked about its story, and learned that compassion won out over pettiness. Years later, new residents would discover the mural and ask, "What's that about?" And the old-timers, with a chuckle, would recount the legend, how a controlling HOA busybody once tried to block a disabled vet from parking, prompting the entire neighborhood and local veterans to respond with a masterpiece of support.